Hi, my name is Robin Wong. I'm a photographer based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. In this video, I want to debunk the myth about continuous autofocus being better than single autofocus. Let's do this! In my previous video, I've talked about the single autofocus performance on this OM system, OM-1 camera being slower and less reliable than the EM-1 Mark III and the EM-5 Mark III, especially in low light and low contrast situations. I'll put the link to the video up here. Please check it out. I'm not going to repeat what I've done. I've said whatever that I wanted to say in that video. In this particular video, I'm not talking about the OM-1's performance. I am not bashing this camera. This is not a follow-up to whatever that I've said. I'm already done with that. I've done my part as a photographer, as a supporter for Micro Four Thirds. I've reported the problem, so it is up to the OM Digital Solutions to respond, and hopefully they'll come up with a fix in the next firmware upgrade. That's the best case scenario. However, there's one particular comment that I want to respond to. That comment, surprisingly, a lot of people are mentioning that, hey Robin, if only you have used the continuous autofocus instead of single autofocus, the autofocus performance would have improved. I beg to differ. I think in really low contrast and low light situations, single autofocus is still superior and it should be the default setting that you use if you want to get high hit rates. And I'm going to prove that in this video. I really don't know how anyone can think that the continuous autofocus can outperform single autofocus, especially when we're dealing with a non-moving subject. In my previous demonstrations, I've always tested the single autofocus for stationary subjects, and yet someone would suggest that, hey Robin, why don't you try the continuous autofocus? How can continuous autofocus be better for non-moving subject? It just doesn't make sense to me. If you're shooting a subject that is moving, if you're tracking the movement of the subject, if you want to use continuous autofocus, that's perfectly fine. Now, we have to understand how the focusing system works. In order for the camera to acquire focus, the camera needs to calculate the distance between the subject and the camera. Once the distance is obtained, then the camera can feed the information to the lens to move the glass elements to acquire a sharp focus. It works the same way for single autofocus and continuous autofocus. The difference is for single autofocus, it just has to focus once because the subject is not moving. But for continuous autofocus, the camera needs to continuously revise the distance and feed the information live to the lens, and the lens will keep on rearranging the glass elements to make sure the subject is in focus. That is the only difference. The mechanism to determine the distance between the camera and the subject is the same. Now, if you are tracking the movement of the subject, if you leave the camera to the entire screen and just leave the camera to decide, then maybe there's some algorithm like that's that bird detection or the face human eye detection, the AI deep learning, the smart intelligent detection. That's depending on the algorithm, the deep learning of the camera to predict the movement. There must be a movement for the camera to predict. Now, in the single autofocus, there's no movement. The camera predicts nothing. I'm keeping this video short. I see no reason to prolong this. I've already proven whatever I wanted to say, that the continuous autofocus is not more reliable than the single autofocus, especially in low contrast, low light situations. But you are free to choose and pick whatever you want to believe. You don't have to trust me. You can ignore all the evidence that I have put out. That's perfectly fine. It's none of my business. But hey, some people actually attack me and say, "Hey Robin, if only you know how to use the camera. Hey Robin, if only you use the right settings, then you wouldn't come across this problem, then the autofocus will work fine." You know what? It is one thing to question me about the camera, my OM-1 is faulty, or if the autofocus is really that slow, but it's another to attack my integrity, and it's another thing to attack me about my knowledge on using the camera. I think that's uncalled for, and I think that's really mean. And you know what? Like my friend Mati Sulanto told me, it's not worth losing sleep over. I'm just gonna put this behind me. I'm gonna move forward. I'm just gonna go out, take more photographs, and be happy. And I'll use this OM-1. I'll continue to make more content on this camera, and I'll share them with you guys. There are things that I love about this camera. It's not all negative, and I do really want to share those things with you very, very soon. That's all I have to share about the continuous autofocus versus single autofocus, shooting non-moving subject in low contrast, low light situation. Hey, you don't have to take my word for it. Do your own test and see whether your findings are the same with mine or not. Then maybe you can make your own video and talk about it. If you found my sharing beneficial, please consider buying me a cup of coffee, or you can contribute directly to my PayPal. Links in the description below on how you can do that. Any small contribution goes a long way, will help me to continue making more honest content like this in this channel. Until the next one, please go out and take more photographs. Bye-bye.